How many of you have ever read Frankenstein? Or seen the movies? Okay, it's an awesome story. I'll give you a quick summary. There's a young doctor named Dr. Frankenstein, and he finds the secret of life. And he decides to go out to the graveyards and dig up a bunch of dead humans, harvest their organs, and several animals. He sews them together somehow and creates this monster, and it becomes alive. Alright? Awesome story. Obviously, when it came out in the 1800s, it inspired a lot of scientists. I mean, you have to think, can that happen? So we're going to ask these questions. Can we actually do that? Can we make a monster? And the simple answer is no. Right? Even with all the science that we have today, we have not been able to revive a human being. So, is there a difference between when he was dead and when he was alive? Is there a difference between the time when we are alive and when we die? I'm going to be arguing for dualism. It answers what is reality by saying there's material objects as well as spiritual objects. Alright, now let's look at this table that Creed explained to us in class. We have science, and the end goal of science is scientific law. We have philosophy, and the end goal of that is truth. And we talked about that with epistemology. Then we have religion, and the end goal is salvation. Now, with science, we get to scientific law, it's supposed to be W, by using empirical evidence. Right? In philosophy, we use logic in our brains. So, when we're going to talk about the material objects first, all right, let's talk about that aspect. Materialism versus idealism. There are things that exist. Right? This exists. I might not know what it is. It might not be what it appears to be. It might be an illusion, but it's still something. Illusion is just something deceiving you to be something else. So it's still something. Now, either it's made of tiny concrete particles, which would be materialism, or it's made of ideas, which idealism supports. Now, these are empirically observable. I can see this, I can touch it, I can taste it. So, according to the table that we just looked at, why not just let science take care of that? Why are we even dealing with that in philosophy? I think philosophy should be the things that we can't observe. That's why we use our brain, the logic, the things that we can't measure. Right? So that's my view on materialism and idealism. We should let science handle it. Now, dualism. It was actually championed by René Descartes. And you can see this diagram he has here of a person perceiving something with his eyes, and it comes reflecting back, and it goes back to that little lobe you can see in the back of his head. And he said that was the mind, not the brain, the mind. So that's the immaterial thing that we can't really measure. And he put some arguments for that. Now, suffocation analogy, and argue of dualism. I thought that was kind of realistic. So, imagine a person is getting suffocated, just like this. Nobody's strangling him, no windpipes are being broken, every organ is intact, all the blood is still running through his body. Even after he dies, his heart will continue to beat for a few seconds anyway. Everything's there. And yet when he dies, he becomes something else. And you could say he looks exactly the same, and he has everything biologically the same. What's the difference? It's as if something is gone. Maybe it's the soul. Maybe it's oxygen. I mean, this is actually just an analogy. Alright? This isn't a proof, because doctors know exactly why we can't revive people. Otherwise, CPR would work. Right? Kills, without oxygen, the brain cells die. But this represents dualism. Alright? A person dies, he becomes a lifeless object. Alright? The soul is gone. That's what dualism states. Now, let's recall some of Descartes' techniques of finding truth. First, he said, whenever you come up to a situation, a difficult situation, you must doubt everything. This erases all biases. Right? Break down the difficulty into several parts that you can analyze individually. Make sure you solve from the simplest items to the most difficult. If you do this, then you can just keep building until you have solved the whole problem. check, and recheck everything. That's the final step. Now, you have to pay special attention to the simplest and most difficult. This is the basis for the rest of my argument, a logical proof of dualism. Alright, we're going to start with the logic of materialism. It does make sense. Alright, we're going to start with the most simple premise that I can think of. I have a brain. And it doesn't get much more simple than that. We know we have a brain. My brain controls all my thoughts and choices. I'm using choices very lightly. It could mean my brain controls everything I do, including that I'm speaking now, that I'm moving my hands, everything. My brain functions solely on electric impulses and chemical reactions. And that's pretty much true. Scientists have found that out. They can hook up wires and tell exactly what your brain is doing. Electric impulses and chemical reactions cannot make choices. They don't have free will. Alright? They are determined. Therefore, I cannot make choices. I'm determined. Now, whether you like that conclusion or not, that's pretty valid. That's pretty good logic right there. However, I don't like that conclusion. So I had to search for a loophole. Logic for dualism. I'm going to start with an even simpler premise than I have a brain. Right? What did they find out before they actually discovered what was in this skull? They probably realized that they had free will. Because you can imagine at some point in time, they didn't know that there was a brain inside the skull. Right? So the decision was probably made at some point to cut open the brain, to cut open the skull, and find out what is inside the head. So my first premise is going to be, I have free will. It seems to be innate within us. I mean, everyone knows you have free will. You either decided to practice for this speech, you could have came in here and said, I was determined not to practice, but that wouldn't have went over well. So, I mean, we just know that you have free will. It might sound like an assumption, but every day, every minute is based on your decisions. I also have a brain. That premise doesn't go away. But if I only had a brain, I'd be determined. Okay, just like my old argument said, brain equals determinism. However, I'm not determined, because I already stated I have a free will. Alright, just follow it. Therefore, I must have something in addition to the brain that controls my free will. Alright? Have a free will, I also have a brain. If I just had the brain, I would be determined. But I have the free will. So, there must be something, which we'll call the soul, that's coexisting within my brain. Alright, this is the basic summary. If I had a brain, it just means determinism. You can't argue anything else because it's just electricity and chemical reactions. So I decided to switch the whole argument and come at it from that side and say we have free will. Therefore, we have a soul.